Hello, and welcome to Unknowable, the podcast where we talk about all things mysterious, unusual, or unknowable. I'm Justine.
And I'm Gray. Some weeks we break down one larger mystery between the two of us. Other weeks we pick two smaller mysteries on a theme and teach each other about them based on our own independent research. This week we're talking about the man from Taured.
Which I hope we're saying that right, because
Right.
It doesn't even exist.
Right, it's not even a real country.
Who knows?
So
this is going to be kind of a mini episode for us.
yeah.
Because there's not much to the
super
story.
detailed.
It's not at all. So, yeah, July 1954.
Right. We're at an airport in Japan.
Yep, in Tokyo.
Haneda Airport.
Business as usual.
Yep.
Everybody's chilling. Then a plane comes from Europe. Drops off his passengers.
Did you see where in Europe?
I didn't see where in Europe, actually.
Yeah, it did just generically say Europe.
Yeah, it was just like a European airline. I was like, okay,
Okay.
it's pretty broad.
It's very broad.
So, yeah, drops off his passengers. A supposedly well-dressed, bearded businessman.
Caucasian.
Yep, Caucasian.
Classic white dude.
Classic confusing white dude.
Yep.
Comes through customs and is kind of like seemingly chatting with the customs officials, like
Right.
talking about this being like his third Japan trip that year.
Yep. He had a French accent or spoke French?
Yeah, he spoke primarily French and also spoke Japanese and several other languages, which I'm not sure how they knew that,
Right.
but seemed like a well-traveled dude.
Right.
Yeah, and then they just asked him for his country of origin, and he responded Taured.
Taured.
And
Which,
they're like, what the fuck?
wait a second. So they're like probably frantically searching through this atlas, like, where the fuck is Taured?
Yeah.
We work in an airport and we don't know this.
Yeah, we don't know this. We have people coming from everywhere.
Right.
And he described it as on the border between France and Spain, which I'm
Right.
assuming came out when they were like, where is
Right.
this? He's like,
Yeah, that country.
that country. Which, funny enough, there is a country
Right.
on the border of France and Spain, which is called Andorra.
The Principality of Andorra.
Yeah. But he became irate, apparently, when they showed him that.
Right.
Said that was not his country.
It's not his country and it didn't look like the map that he's used to,
Right.
which is interesting.
Which is interesting.
And yet he did describe it as between the border of France and Spain.
Yeah. Which,
So he had
when I
that
looked
part
at the
of the
map, there's no
geography.
other country
Right.
aside from Andorra.
Right. So it's like he had that part of the geography correct, but
Yeah.
just the country in between was wrong. It wasn't Andorra.
Yeah.
It's weird.
He said his country had been there for over 1,000 years,
Right.
which I looked up the history of Andorra, and it was kind of unclear because it's like a country gets like established at a certain point, but then like obviously it existed
Right.
long before that, but like maybe it was something different. I don't know.
Right. Well, like
So-
you have like South Sudan just became a country in, a couple years ago.
Oh, yeah.
Or you have like Egypt that's been a country for, 2,000 years.
Right.
So it's like South Sudan's always been there. It just hasn't always been called South Sudan.
Exactly.
So I would assume that if he said that Taured has been around for 1,000 years, that would mean that a country called Taured or something similar to that has existed for 1,000 years.
Yeah.
The way that like Italy has been called multiple other things, but it's still always pretty much been Italy.
Right. Because it did seem like Andorra, as it is now, had not been there for 1,000 years.
Interesting.
Maybe close, but not quite.
Right.
So, which like almost seems weird to me, just in the sense that I feel like off the top of my head, I couldn't, like, I feel terrible about it, but I couldn't tell you how long, like, the United States has been a country.
Really?
Which is really bad.
1776.
Okay, yeah. Yeah. That's not really that long.
No.
No,
It's
not at all.
we're super young.
Yeah. But, like, I just don't know if I would know that. Like, if I was, like, at the airport and somebody was like, that country doesn't exist, like, I'm not sure that it would spring to my mind.
Yeah.
Like, we've been a country since 1776. This is bullshit.
I'm from America. Have you heard of it?
Yeah. How do you not know this?
Right.
But he was very confused. So up until this point, this sounds like a story that could just be like, this dude was,
He had like a
Confused.
stroke
Yeah.
or some like dementia or something.
yeah, something was confused. But supposedly, he produced a passport
Right.
and a driver's license
Right.
issued from the country of Taured.
Totally legit looking.
Yeah.
Like weathered. It had like multiple stamps in it corroborating his claim that he had visited Japan 3 other times on business.
Yeah.
So it was like a legit passport, but from a country that didn't exist.
Right.
Which, again, if this were to be some sort of like prank or hoax or something, producing a professional-looking passport would not be easy, but I feel like it's doable.
It's doable.
It's a lot of effort to go through for like this really like, oh, I'm going to pull one over on these like random like immigration workers in Japan.
Yeah, and just hope that this becomes like a story that's told forever.
Right.
I mean, if that's what he was going for, he succeeded.
Succeeded very well.
Because now it's 2018 and we're talking about the man from Taured.
But we're going to see why this isn't... The whole hoax thing actually seems like the least, like, plausible explanation here.
Yeah, which is kind of bizarre.
Right. Usually at least, like, a hoax is, like, up there.
Yeah.
It's, like, either one or two.
Yeah, but this one, it just doesn't...
No.
Doesn't fit.
There's other theories, but not hoax.
Not hoax. No, I mean, possible, but... No, so they're like, what the fuck? They checked the company he said he was meeting with, who didn't know who he was. And the hotel he said he had a room at didn't know who he was either. There was no room under his name.
Right.
Wish we knew what his name was.
Yeah, right. I just realized that. Why don't they? If it's not under his name, then he had to have had a name.
Right. He had to have, yeah. But, no, but yeah, so nobody knew. Oh, and the bank listed on his checkbook appeared to not exist as well. Which is interesting. I assume it would be a bank in Taured.
Right.
Which I guess, I mean, there are banks, obviously, that exist in other countries, too. But, yeah, the bank did not seem to exist.
It would make sense that if he was from Taured, he would have a bank account in Taured, and that would be sort of like his primary bank.
But didn't exist.
Interesting.
Because Taured didn't exist.
Right.
Apparently Taured didn't have, like, Bank of America.
Right.
If that was even a thing in the 50s. Was that a thing in the 50s? I don't know.
Probably? I don't know.
I shouldn't know that. Why would I know that? Who would know that?
You don't know when America's from? You don't know when Bank of America's from?
Yeah, I don't know the history of Bank of America.
Do you know anything about America?
No. I really
Good.
don't. But I know about Taured.
Yep.
Yeah, so he's confused, they're confused, he's getting pissed. It's like, why can't you find this? I'm imagining, I mean, if he's legitimate,
Yeah.
he's probably really fucking scared. Wouldn't you be scared if you landed somewhere that you'd been before?
Right.
Which, the confusing part
Right.
is if he was from Taured
Right.
and had gone to Japan before.
Right.
That means that, like, there had been times he had been there and given his passport and all his info, and they had been like, cool.
Yeah.
Stamped it and just gone along.
Right.
Which, so if you went there for the third or fourth time that year, presumably not the only 3 or 4 times in your whole life,
Right.
and then all of a sudden they're like, what is this country? Like, what are you talking about?
Right.
Then you'd be like, what the hell? Like,
Be very surreal.
yeah.
Like if you go to Canada a lot, and then someday you go to Canada, and they're like, "Where are you from?" And I'm like, "America." And they're
Yeah.
like, "What?" And you're
what are
like,
you
"Is that
talking
country directly below you?" Like,
Yeah.
no. Is it this country? Some random name? And you're like, "What? No."
No. Yeah.
Yeah.
Putting myself in his shoes, like, it sounds terrifying.
Yeah.
Just
Very terrifying.
being like, I don't know how to prove
You'd
to
probably
you.
think you were like going crazy, that like you had some kind of stroke, or that you had
Yeah.
early onset dementia, or
And then how do you explain to yourself that you have this passport
right,
from this country that you know you're from
right,
with these stamps in it, like, that prove that you've been here before?
right, with like a lifetime of experience in that country.
Yeah. Messed up.
Wild.
Yeah. So they can't figure it out. They take him to a hotel room, and they have immigration officials guarding his room
Right.
because, presumably they're like, I have no idea what's going on with this guy. Probably seems suspicious in some way.
Oh yeah.
And
Traveling with a false passport.
exactly, yeah, that's not a small crime.
Nope.
But I'm assuming it was the next morning.
Right.
They must have gone in to like check on him or whatever because he wasn't coming back to the airport, and he was just vanished.
Gone. Like
Despite-
no sign that anybody had spent the night in that room at all.
Yeah. And his documentation, which was at the airport security room, not even in his room,
So his like
Was also
passport
gone.
and everything
yeah,
just vanished.
gone.
It's weird.
So that's pretty much all we know
That's
about
it.
this story. I looked it up on multiple different places to see like if there was some more detail. Like really the only other details I got was like one of them mentioned that he was bearded and
Right.
the other one didn't. I'm like, okay, that's
Right.
relevant.
He had a pocket full of European money.
Yeah. Right? Yeah,
So-
one of the things mentioned that was kind of like, backing up the fact that he said that he traveled a lot. He did have all this foreign currency from countries that existed.
Right. Real
So,
country.
that would have been cool if he had currency from countries that didn't exist.
Right.
Damn it. But yeah, so this dude's from Taured, and he's just chilling in Europe, chilling in Japan,
Yeah.
going on business,
Just doing his thing.
and then he disappears.
So what's happening here? Like what does this story mean?
Right. So of course, not number one, but one of the options, as we
Yes.
said, is it was a hoax.
Hoax. It appeared in this book in 1954.
Yep.
May or may not be real, may or may not have been like just sort of like a cool story.
I mean, it is a fucking cool story.
It is a cool story.
But-
regardless. So it could technically be a hoax, I guess.
Right. And so the
skeptical part
idea
of my brain
is that he did not commit the hoax, but that somebody just made up the story.
Right.
Because
that this never existed.
It'd be a lot of effort for him, for some dude to do that.
And the reason I don't think that he hoaxed it is that, like, the whole him disappearing, I could see, like, he slipped out the window or something of the hotel. But the documents disappearing from the airport simultaneously seems prohibitively difficult for one dude, or, like, for one dude to have done easily, because otherwise you'd have to have, like, a network of people helping you perpetrate this really localized hoax, and you're really only, like, confusing, like, 4 people.
Yeah.
And, like, it's a lot of effort to go through.
It's kind of, like, would be on par. I mean, not totally on par, but for some reason this made me think. Have you seen that video where the dudes walk around, like, the grocery store and places, and they put hot dogs in people's pockets?
Oh, yeah.
And, like, in their hoods and like, in their bags and stuff. Yep. Be like, I mean, that's obviously not as difficult to pull off, but the idea that you're only confusing, like, one person.
Right.
And you're watching them be confused, and that's, like, it. And then
That's
you're
it.
just like, I'm done.
That's the payoff.
Though, the funny part about that video, and we're getting way off topic,
Yes.
but he put a hot dog in somebody's pocket at one point, and then they were then at a gas station later that night, like, throwing hot dogs on people's windows, like, from a distance while they were, like, pumping their gas. And it turned out to be one of the dudes from the store from earlier. He was like, what? And they were like, holy shit. It was hilarious. You should look up hot dog pocket video. I don't know, but it's fucking so funny. But anyways, same kind of idea.
It's exactly like that.
It's totally like that. Man from Taured, hot dogs in pockets.
Right.
But same idea that, like, you know, I mean, that's funny, but for him, it would be like, why go through all that?
Right.
Just
it's
to
a lot
confuse
of
a few
effort.
people. Yeah.
And, like, making a fake passport and everything is also, like, a federal crime.
Yeah. Federal crime. Probably expensive unless you, like, knew a dude.
But even then, like, that dude's not going to do it for free.
Right. So you're paying a lot of money to confuse, like, 5 people.
Right.
And, like, it didn't seem like this was reported, like, in newspapers. It wasn't like he got publicity.
Right.
Even to be like, oh, this is awesome. Like, I mean, some people are into that.
Right.
Like,
I mean, we're
seeing
talking about
that
it right now.
Yeah, we're talking about it now. Years and years later. So, but yeah, that just doesn't seem likely.
No. Hoax is, I guess, technically... hoax by the man from Taured is extremely unlikely.
Yeah.
Hoax, as in somebody just made this whole story up,
Right.
is relatively likely.
Yeah. That could definitely be.
Yeah.
Yeah. You compared it to the show Fact or Fiction.
Yes.
Or Beyond
Beyond
Belief, Fact or Fiction. Which I started watching again recently, and I got frustrated with a little bit because, I want to look up these stories.
Right.
Because I'm like, oh, some of these could make cool episodes, and some of these just sound interesting.
Right.
And occasionally you look up episodes and you can't, like, you find the story, but it's not actually really how they portrayed it. Like, there was an episode where a kid was being bullied by his friends and his brother. It's like, what a shit brother.
Right.
Teasing his own, like, harassing his own brother with his friends. And so this kid was being harassed because he, like, believed that there was a monster in his closet. They were making fun of him. They get him to the house at one point, and they're in the room, like, making fun of him. And he's like, he says something, like, go in there and see or whatever. So the brother that was bullying him goes into the closet to be like, okay, see, like, I'm gonna get eaten by the monster or whatever. And then when he goes in there, he starts, like, screaming and panicking. But the friends, like, just assume that he's just messing around. And the brother's all scared because he's like, see, like, there is a monster. And they open the door and the kid's gone.
Oh, wow.
And supposedly they could, like, they never found him again, is
Right.
how the episode portrayed it. And I was like, holy shit.
Right.
Had to look this up. Turns out that I guess the producer at the time, like, thought that was the story, but the real story was that the kid did disappear and they couldn't find him, but they ended up finding out that he, like, slipped out through, like, a ceiling tile in the closet and he ran away. So they found him, like, 2 weeks later.
That's bizarre.
Which, again, isn't a very elaborate hoax.
Right,
Dude,
why?
like, you fucking scared the shit out of your whole
For 2
family.
weeks.
Yeah, for 2
It's
weeks.
excessive.
So he did not actually disappear, but I was like, this is crazy. And there was another story that was wild, and I looked it up. I could not find a single article about it anywhere. And I was like, somebody just bullshit this.
And that's, like, kind of what I was, when I was researching this topic, I, like, was really trying to dive deep and see, like, where did it come from? What kind of story is this? And there's, like, some vague information out there.
Yeah.
But it's, like, not super well documented, so.
No, it's all the same,
That
like,
could either
rewritten
corroborate
story.
it, or it could, like, debunk it, because either it hasn't been reported on a lot because this one report happened that was factual, and that's it, and that's all you're going to get.
Yeah.
Or somebody made it up.
Right. Well, we were saying before we started recording that it seems to lend some small credibility, the fact that it seems like the story has never really changed.
Right.
It's not like it keeps getting details added or altered or whatever. Like, it's always the same airport, the same year, same dude.
What strikes me about it is that it's all very, like, logical and like there's nothing really paranormal going on except for him vanishing and the fact that the country he's from doesn't exist.
Right.
The rest of it, he's just like regular businessman, doesn't have any supernatural powers. He's not like doing anything like creepy or anything. There's no cryptids.
Yeah.
He's just a businessman traveling with a passport trying to get through security. And he just happens to be from a country that doesn't exist.
Trying to go to like a business meeting.
Right.
He's not even doing anything cool.
Right. He's not even like, I'm here to like on vacation. He's like, dude, like I'm at work.
Yeah.
Preventing you
I
from
have
going
a
to work.
hotel. I'm going to meet like this company.
Right.
And he can't even do that.
Right. So like, it all seems so ordinary.
Yeah.
But then the weirdness is that like the foundation of the story is that he's from somewhere that doesn't exist.
Right.
In our plane of existence.
Exactly.
So that kind of transitions us into theory number 2.
Yes.
Which is he's from a parallel dimension.
Yes.
Or universe or...
Which I think this is the most likely.
I agree.
Because I think the only other possibility is that he's a time traveler.
Yes.
Which makes no sense if he was confused.
Right. Like okay, let's talk about the time traveler aspect first.
Yeah.
So if he was... I've read that before too. So if he was a time traveler, he is presumably coming from the future, not the past, into the present.
Yeah.
So if he's coming from the future to the present, he is saying that Taured is a country and has existed for 1,000 years. So say in 100 years, Taured or Andorra stops being a country and turns into Taured for whatever reason. Some like overthrow happens in like 100 years from the present. Then, 1,000 years goes by. It's 3,050 or whatever. And, this person from Taured travels back in time to the 1954 and so he has the ability to time travel and yet then hops on a fucking regular plane to fly somewhere. Has a pocket full of European money. So he's aware of all the countries that exist because he has all this money from, either like he got it in the future and they made it for him. So when he went back, it would make sense. Or he travels back in time and accumulates this money. So he spent time in Europe.
Yeah.
And you don't think he would have checked like, hey, is the country that my passport's in, does this exist back then?
Right.
If you're going back in time, I'm sure a bunch of countries and stuff are going to be different from 1954. So you would do like your research and you know all of this going in.
Yeah.
So it doesn't, the whole time traveler thing is more confusing than anything. Like that doesn't really do it for me.
Right. Did he time travel by accident? Like this like classic, like Fry slips into the time traveling machine and is like, whoops.
Right.
And then, and even he knew what he had done. Like he just ended up in Japan in 1954 and had no idea. And then was like, wait a second.
He didn't stick out. Like
No.
if I went back in time into 1954, I would stick out like a sore thumb.
Right,
Just
even
based on
now.
what I was wearing.
Yeah.
And it's only 50 years on.
Exactly.
So
we're
we're-
presuming he's from at least 1,000 years in the future.
Right.
If not, probably more.
I just don't, the whole time traveler aspect of it, like he doesn't seem like he's on like any kind of mission. He doesn't seem like he has like a really like strong purpose of what he's doing.
No.
And if he did, it's very sloppy because they've issued him a passport from somewhere that doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Unless he's a time traveler trying to accomplish something from the future. And not only did he go back in time, but he accidentally just slipped one dimension over. So the whole like interdimensional travel as well as time travel at the same time.
Right.
I could plausibly see that, but there has to be some sort of dimensional shift
Exactly.
in this story for it to make sense because he's aware of all of the other geography that's going on. And it's like almost like, and he understands like our physics, he understands our money, he's wearing our clothes.
Yeah.
So everything, it's like almost everything is exactly the same except the country of Andorra has turned into Taured.
Yeah.
That's the only difference. And then he vanishes without trace.
So it's got to be different dimension.
It's got to be.
He slipped into another dimension. Again, obviously not on purpose because he was confused. He's like angry. He's trying to convince them of this thing existing.
Right.
Because he must not have meant to do that. So whether this was just some dude.
Yeah.
I mean, we're not even, it seems even like, I think the assumption is kind of that he like was purposely shifting.
Right.
Which I don't think makes sense either because then he'd be prepared for the fact.
Exactly.
But he wasn't prepared. And so that makes no sense. So it would seem like, like one of us just accidentally slipping into a dimension. Yeah.
Well, think about it this way too. So the thing he was doing directly before he interacted with all of the airport people was flying on a plane. And think about all the stories you've heard of weird shit happening on planes. Planes disappearing.
Yep.
Planes there's tons of stories about planes flying and then all of a sudden people seeing like this one guy was flying over England and then all of a sudden like passed through some clouds and then came out on the other side of the clouds and saw England, but it was like 5 years in the future, and like saw like these people wearing like these very specific uniforms that they weren't wearing at the time, and so he goes back in time and then lives 5 years later. He sees like people are wearing these uniforms all of a sudden. He's like, oh, I saw this 5 years ago flying over in a plane.
Yeah.
They're like, we just got these uniforms. So it's like the idea of like flying in planes,
Yeah.
traveling to other dimensions accidentally, like not through any agency, just you're just all of a sudden like slip almost.
Which then makes you wonder. So then which seems to make the most sense to me too, as far as him physically, his body vanishing, as well as even his belongings, because they all belonged in that different dimension.
Right.
So it makes sense that they would all just disappear.
It's like seeking, like the two dimensions are seeking equilibrium.
Yeah.
So they just like they just suck him back through the membrane.
Yeah.
With all the stuff that was with him that's
With the
supposed to
stuff.
be in this dimension.
Which is kind of awesome to think about.
Right.
So
because like those stories, like that one I just told about that dude in England.
Yeah.
It's sort of like he kind of slips into the other dimension and slips back into his. So it's like you almost like vanish from this dimension, show up in another one, but then you get like pulled back into the one you're supposed to be in. It's not like you stay. Which
is crazy, because then you'd think like, I mean, both of those people seemingly were only in the other dimensions for a very short time.
Right.
So, and like the one guy was on a plane, this guy was on a business trip, so there's really nobody that necessarily like missed them. I mean, I guess if he is on a business trip, maybe he was like a day late to his stuff because he's like, oh, I gotta do this stuff. But maybe not. Maybe he had the hotel room to sleep and then do his business meeting the next day. Maybe he slipped back into his right dimension and he was like, oh,
he woke up in the hotel room and he's like, wow, that was a weird dream.
Yeah, that was bizarre. And didn't realize that actually happened.
And then he tells the story in his timeline, like, yeah, they were showing me this country. It was called like Andorra or something, like where Taured's supposed to be.
Yeah. And they're like, what?
What? That sounds fake.
Yeah, that sounds totally fake. So that seems to be the most plausible thing.
And what's interesting about it is it really opens up the idea for me of like thinking about interdimensional travel, or like the idea of two dimensions being so close to each other that something can dip in and out.
Yeah.
Because this is going to come up a lot with topics that we talk about in the future. Skinwalker Ranch.
Oh, yeah.
UFOs.
Yep.
Bigfoot. Mothman.
Yeah.
Like, if you think about the idea of things slipping into our dimension for a short period of time and then slipping back into their dimension because they're seeking equilibrium, you have a lot of, like, you have an explanation for almost every cryptid and like weird paranormal experience that anybody's ever reported.
It's kind of awesome to think about.
They call it the grand unified theory of everything.
Jesus. It just makes you wonder. I mean, presumably so like this guy slipped from his dimension into our dimension,
right?
We'll say. And he just happened to notice because of just going through customs. Like, it was just perfectly timed. So you would have to think that there could be times that but there's potentially two universes or two dimensions that are almost the same, that have minor differences. Right. And obviously there's theories that there are infinite dimensions, that, you know, some of them are drastically different. Right. Again, to reference a popular TV show, there's that episode of Family Guy. Yeah. With like the Road to the Multiverse or whatever. Oh yeah. Where he's just bouncing around between and like some of them are almost the same. Yeah. And some of them are totally bizarre. Like they have that one where they're in the barber thing, like, you know, the black and white spinny thing, and they're just spinning through it like forever, and he's just like, what the hell? And they're like, I don't know, for some reason this is life. Like shit like that. Like there could be dimensions that are completely off the wall, just crazy, and then dimensions that are essentially the same except for one small, or there was a dimension that was different because I forget who it was, but somebody hadn't become president. Right. It might have been JFK and like Nixon hadn't become president. It was something like that where like this person didn't get killed, so this person never became president. Right. And then like the whole course of history changes. So you'd think that maybe you or I have potentially slipped into another dimension at one point or another. Yeah. And maybe it was so similar and for such a short time that we never noticed.
I was thinking about that earlier today. Like the idea of like, you know, Yamas Vu? Jamais vu? No. So it's like the opposite of deja vu. Oh, shit. So if deja vu is an unfamiliar situation feeling familiar, jamais vu, I don't know how to say it. Yeah, sure. Is a situation that should be familiar feeling completely alien. So if you've done something a million times, but all of a sudden it feels like you've never done it before and you get that weird, eerie feeling, what if that's because you step out your front door and all of a sudden you're in another dimension and your feelers go up because the animal part of your brain can pick up on something's different. Like,
Yeah.
I'm somewhere different. And so a familiar action doesn't feel familiar because you're completing that action in somewhere totally different than where you're used to.
Oh, that's crazy.
Fully different dimension.
It's so, like, I can imagine many times I've felt deja vu, but I can't think of a time that I've experienced that.
Yeah. Occasionally, like, I'll try to go, like, what happens to me usually is forgetting how to enter a password, like on a computer, where it's just all muscle memory, and then all of a sudden that muscle memory isn't there, and you're like, wait, what the fuck is my password?
Yeah.
You're trying to enter it, and you're like trying to remember the steps that your fingers make, but you can't do it.
Can't do it.
It doesn't feel familiar.
Mm-hmm.
That's usually
That's
where it
happened.
comes up to me.
Yeah, I've had that and, like, entering my PIN number.
Yeah.
The other day, I just had to run my card as a credit because I thought about it just long enough that I was like, and I could not think of what it was.
Have you ever, like, stepped outside, like, maybe first thing in the morning, and it's, like, really quiet, and, like, there's nobody out, and there's just, like, sort of, like, an eerie feeling in the air, like, it just feels, maybe not, like, sinister, but it just feels, like, eerie.
Yeah.
Or, like, something's, like, off.
Yep.
It's happened to me, like, when I'll, like, walk the dog sometimes. We'll go down, and, like, all three of us, like, me and the two dogs, will all just kind of, like, stand there and just look around, like, almost, like, waiting for, like, something to happen.
Yeah.
Because it just feels like something.
Oh,
and maybe it's because we've slipped into another dimension for...
Yeah.
You know,
the dogs would know too.
Right.
They'd probably know before you did.
Absolutely know. Oh, yeah.
I think about that sometimes when I'm walking with Mukau, and occasionally she'll get nervous or she'll, like, not want to keep walking because of, like, I'll hear something. Like, she hates when planes go overhead, like, that rumbling noise. But there are times where nothing changes. Like, I don't hear a single thing. There's not a dog. There's not a plane. And she will just stop and, like, won't want to keep going. And I'll either have to just turn around with her, or I'll have to, like, physically pull her to be like, let's go.
Yeah.
And there are times where I'm like, she's sensing something.
Yeah. I would just turn around.
Yeah. There have been, I tried to take her, there's these creepy woods kind of at the end of the street.
Yeah.
And you can go through them a little bit and then see, like, the big giant power lines that are over there. And it's kind of creepy to go over there. And the one time we were walking through there and she did that. It was, like, winter. So it's kind of, it's eerily quiet anyways. And then she just planted herself. And, like, she was kind of shaking, like, tail tucked a little bit. And I was like, we're not fucking going any further. I don't know what's going on over here. But you know, or maybe you don't know, but you're just scared as hell.
Yep. Something's not right.
Something's not right.
Trust that.
Yeah. So it could definitely be happening.
Yeah, so that's interesting to think about. Like, how many times have we all slipped into another dimension and not even known it?
Yeah.
You know, there's these big, major situations where it turns into a story that we talk about in a podcast, but,
yeah,
you know,
it could happen all the time.
All the time, we don't even know it.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely believe that there are different dimensions out there. I feel like there has to be.
Makes the most sense.
It definitely makes the most sense for so many reasons. And yeah, you wouldn't necessarily know. Or people have bizarre, like, we should actually do an episode on, it's not, like, we were trying to think of what other topic would be, like, similar enough to this man from Taured to, like, put them as a theme. And there really were no other specific travelers.
Right.
But there have been people who have, like, I vaguely remember this one story that was, like, somebody was walking their dogs somewhere in, like, a place like Arizona or, like, New Mexico or something. And I think, like, the dog pulled out of his hand and he, like, fell and seemingly, like, kind of, like, knocked himself out.
Yeah.
And I think it was a similar kind of thing where he, like, woke up and things were weird for a while.
Huh.
Like, not for, like, days and days, but, like, for, you know, presumably, like, a few hours or something.
Yeah.
And he was confused. He, like, didn't know where he was. Like, again, like, things were similar but different.
Right.
And he was like, what the fuck? And then somehow he came back to normal life. And so he's telling the story and people are like, okay, yeah, like, you knocked yourself out.
Right.
Which that's, of course, like, who's going to question that really?
Right.
Besides us. But people are like, yeah, you, like, were knocked unconscious. Like, you were dreaming or, you know, whatever. But he's like, there are people that are convinced that they, like, something happened and they slipped into a different dimension like that.
Yeah.
So that could be a cool thing just to, like, share people's different stories because it seemingly happens.
Right. And there are stories like this where there's not a ton of detail and there's not a ton of, like, corroboration that can happen.
Right.
So it's a lot of speculation, but...
Oh, yeah, because it's just one person's recollection. And again, yeah, they often have situations like that where they were knocked over or some other bizarre thing. But you can go on, like... I feel like it's similar to that subreddit called Glitch in the Matrix.
Yes.
Just those instances. Oh, my God, like... weird-ass shit. Like, people just driving along, going, like, you know, to my mom's house or going to work, like, places you've driven a million times.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, you're lost out of nowhere. You have no idea where you are. Or you turn down a road and suddenly you're somewhere totally different. The one, like, person had said that they were Yeah, they were supposed to be driving home from somewhere, and they knew it was going to take like 3 hours, and, you know, left at 8 o'clock or whatever. Drove down a road, were totally confused. They were like lost, like had no idea where they had gone. They had done this drive a million times, and then finally found their way out of it. And like all of a sudden they were like on their street and like pulled into their driveway, and it had only taken them like an hour and a half.
Weird.
And they were like, there's no way
Right.
there's like any kind of shortcut. Like there's no possibility. So it's like when shit like that happens, like how is that not a different dimension?
Right.
That you're just like, whoops, like took a weird turn, went into it. Yeah, again, a place that's like almost the same,
Right.
but you don't know it.
Just slightly off.
And then you just, whoops, like things just come back together, and it's like, pop, you're back in your dimension. And then you're back home. And then people are like, what the fuck just happened? And nobody believes you, because like, who would believe that?
Right. It's such an easy thing to dismiss because you snap back into like real life.
Yeah.
And so you can just be like, oh, like that, I must have, you know, whatever. It must have been like tripping that day or something.
Yeah.
But no, like that could very well be a real experience. And if you trusted your instincts more, I think we might identify more interdimensional slips or whatever.
I mean, according to that subreddit, it happens all the time.
All the time. And we just need to be more aware of it.
Yeah.
Same thing with like the whole like Mary Celeste.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
another candidate for people slipping into another dimension and not slipping
true.
back.
That'll be an episode.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting.
No, those stories freak me out. Like, the one person said they like pulled up to their grandmother's house, saw her waving in the window, wearing like a pink dress, and, you know, we're like, hey, like waved back, went back to their car just for a second to like grab some stuff, and then went inside. And when they got inside, she was wearing like something totally different, like a green shirt and pants. And he was like, what? Like,
That's
you know,
weird.
she's like 80. He literally took like 30 seconds to get inside. There's no way she could have changed her clothes.
Right.
And so he's like, what the fuck? Like, and that's like another one of those weird things where it's like, yeah, was that just, everything was exactly the same, but his grandmother was wearing a different outfit in that dimension.
So if you go with the whole multiple universe theory, it's that like any sort of like chance, anything in life that's basically like an A or B decision, like a, you know, flip of a coin or whatever,
Yep.
there's instantly two universes, one where it's A and one where it's B. So I guess the grandmother waking up in the morning, she decides to put on that pink dress.
Yep.
And, you know, another chance she could decide to put on that green dress. And everything else is exactly the same about the two dimensions. The only difference is she put a green dress on that day instead of the pink dress.
Exactly. And then that's why some universes end up so different at some point, because like the whole theory of like a butterfly flapping its wings, like there's plenty of universes where that would be like nothing would change from her choosing a different dress.
Right.
But then there are universes where a small thing, like I think about that all the time when you're driving along. Like
Right.
either there's days where you just happen to like decide to go a different route for whatever reason. And it's like people all the time, like 9/11 and stuff, like people were like, oh,
Yep.
it's so weird. Like I was supposed to be at work that day.
Yep.
But, you know, some of them had legitimate things, but some of them it was like a rant, like some of them just had a feeling.
Right.
Some of them weird shit happened, like just a stack of bizarre things kept them from getting to work on time. Like
Right.
that can't be a coincidence.
No.
And then there's people who maybe wouldn't have been at work that early and ended up there by accident. Like,
Right.
so I think about it all the time where it's like people have stories where they're like, oh my God, if I had taken my normal route home, there was like a big accident. Like I probably would have been in it. But then it's like, plenty of times you do that stuff and nothing happens. But it's like, how do you know you didn't avoid something?
Right.
You don't know about every single thing that happens. Like, what if you had taken a left instead of a right, which had led you to do something else, which, you know, you got caught up in like a bank robbery or
Right.
whatever, like some fucking shit.
Right.
But like everything could have consequences down the line, but sometimes it just takes a long time for them to stack up.
It's interesting.
It's fascinating.
It's a can of worms too.
Yeah,
When you start thinking about
this
it,
topic
it's
is just like, yeah. It's one of those things where if you think about it too long, you start freaking out a little bit.
start questioning your whole reality.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the man from Taured,
Man from Taured.
which we still literally had like a paragraph of information and we still talked for almost 35 minutes.
Yeah. Hey, it's an interesting topic, and it's something that I hope people listening to this start to think about, the idea of multiple universes, like, people who are listening to this podcast are probably interested in many paranormal things.
True.
Start thinking about paranormal things in or through the lens of multiple universes and the interaction of those multiple universes, and you'll start to find that a lot of things start to make sense if you think of them as existing in a universe that's very similar to ours but just slightly off.
Right. Like the fact that we're in a different dimension right now
Right.
with all the fucked up shit happening in our world.
Right.
We just slipped into whatever you want to call it, a alternate dimension, a simulation,
Right.
whatever. But
Oh man, that's a whole.
yeah, that's a whole other can of worms. But, just thinking about that, like, it's possible that, if there's a lot of people that can pinpoint a certain time where just things started feeling different, maybe we all just slipped somehow. Maybe we're going to slip back in.
2016.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, think about it. And check out Glitch in the Matrix subreddit.
Yes.
You do not have to have an account to go check it out. You can just go read stories or just Google Glitch in the Matrix in general.
Yeah.
You will find so many stories.
And it's really fascinating and strangely creepy. Like, I don't find
Really
myself,
creepy.
like, creeped out a lot by, like, stuff that's parallel universe related, but, like, a lot of them are really, like, eerie.
Mm-hmm.
And it's almost as if there's, like, the creepy part is that, like, it feels like there's some sort of sentience going on with the glitch in the Matrix as a phenomenon altogether. Like, almost as if something is, like, directing the glitch in the Matrixes from happening, or someone else is aware of it other than just the experiencer.
Yeah.
Which, who knows what that is?
Yeah, it's a whole other thing. But yeah, they're creepy. Mm-hmm. And it's just when you read about how many people experience them, and again, it's Reddit. Who knows? I mean, people just, there's plenty of Reddits where people are just making up scary stories.
Right.
No sleep.
Right.
So there's all kinds of stuff like that, but they just seem convincing. It maybe just in the sense that a lot of them are so minor. It's not like something crazy wild happens. Like almost all of the Glitch in the Matrix stories are kind of called that because it really is just a little glitch. It's not a massive, my whole life is different. But I've seen a few people in there that are like, this weird thing happened one day and now nothing has felt right since.
Right.
And, this person in my life is different to me now. Like, yeah, just minor changes. And it's like, that person totally slipped. They slipped and they didn't slip back.
Right.
And it's not different enough that their whole life is, drastically altered, but it's different enough that they know it. And they're aware every day of, like, I don't fit here.
We haven't even, like, touched on the whole Berenstain Bears thing.
Oh, yeah.
Or, like...
That's going to be a whole episode of, what's that called? Mandela Effect.
Mandela Effect, yeah.
Yeah.
Which it's, like, that's totally related to alternate universes, because the idea is that at some point, first of all, everybody who's alive who remembers it being Berenstain Bears, we were all in one universe together. And then at some point, either our universe merged with another, or we all slipped into an alternate universe where it's Berenstain Bears. And there's some people who populate this universe who always have had Berenstain Bears because they're like natives to this universe.
Yeah.
And then there's us who remember being Berenstain Bears, who are newcomers to this universe, who are very confused by it.
Exactly.
And there's all kinds of things like that. There's all kinds of weird interactions. Like, what if you remember being Berenstain Bears, but you also remember there being a movie called Shazam with you know what I mean? Like, what's that interaction? Or what does that Venn diagram look like of people who are natives to one universe where this makes sense, but like a different Mandela effect they experience from like a different perspective. So it's a mind fuck because there's got to be so many universes.
I'm thinking that Venn diagram just looks like what was that thing that we used to play with as a kid that was like you kind of had the little pen that would like loop around on the circular thing and it would just
spirograph?
It looks like a spirograph.
Yes, because there's like a million different
there's
circles.
like 1,000 circles that are like all overlapping a little bit. Yeah, because I remember Shazam being a movie.
I don't like, and it's not that I remember it differently or anything. It's just I was too young.
Yeah,
I don't remember Mandela dying in prison because I was too young.
I don't remember that either. But there are definitely like when you and we'll do an episode on this, but there's a whole bunch of those things where it's like it just seems crazy that all these people without like talking to each other. Like when I first heard about that Shazam thing, I was like, holy shit! I probably texted like 20 people. When I first read that article, and I was just like, do you remember a movie? I didn't send them the article. I wasn't like, hey, there's this debate. I was just like, do you remember that movie Shazam? Like, remember what that like movie poster looked like? And most of the people I texted, like all in my age group-ish, were like, yeah. And they could like describe the poster, and it was the same as what I remembered it as.
Yeah.
And I'm like, how does that make sense? And like most of the people hadn't. I was like, okay, check out this article. And a few people were like, oh yeah, I saw that. But most of them were like, oh, holy shit.
Right.
They hadn't even seen it or heard of it yet. And so it's not like they were reading it and then, you start to think like, no, there totally was a movie. Like on their own independently, they were like, yeah, I remember that movie.
Right.
So it's like, how do you explain that? Alternate dimension.
Alternate dimension. That's the only thing that makes sense.
It's messed up.
Freaks me out.
Yeah, that whole concept. So, yeah, we've like planted the seeds now for like 5 different episodes.
Yes. Well, I think this is a good because this is going to sort of be an explanation for a lot of things moving forward.
Yeah.
I mean, we've already done the Mothman episode, but on your own, go back and re-listen to the Mothman episode, but think about it in the context of a dimensional slip.
Right.
Think about the Mothman and Injured Cold being from a different dimension, and Mothman slipped through, and Injured Cold came here to bring him back.
Yeah. And it explains so much about cryptids in general, generally like appearing for a short time.
Right.
Mothman always being in a place for a little bit and then never being seen again.
And gone.
Yeah. So.
UFOs too.
Yep. Yep. There will be like a whole bunch of sightings in an area for whatever span of time. And then nothing for a long time. Or maybe ever again.
And are the men in black, the guarders, the people who are aware of the membrane between our dimension and the next dimension, and they're the ones who are responsible for making sure that everything's at equilibrium.
Yeah.
So maybe, the man from Taured, maybe he slipped into this dimension, and it wasn't just this sort of natural force that brought him back into the other dimension. He was forcibly removed.
Right.
By the men in black who came, brought him back to his dimension.
Yeah.
What is that? Deported him back to his dimension?
Yeah. They were like, bro, you don't belong here.
Yeah, it's Dimensional Ice. Wow. That's a great rap name.
That's a great rap name. Wow. Keep an eye out for that too.
Right.
Dimensional Ice.
Coming 2019.
It's coming to Spotify. Coming to SoundCloud.
SoundCloud rapper.
Oh, shit.
Dimensional Ice.
Oh, man. Yeah, so.
That's it.
That's it. Man from Taured.
Man from Taured.
We just talked about dimensional shifts for a while.
It's interesting.
It's super interesting. And I could talk for like another hour about this.
Stay tuned for like 5 more episodes.
Yeah, for like a million. We're going to talk about Mary Celeste, Mandela Effect,
Skinwalker Ranch,
Skinwalker Ranch, many other cryptids.
Yes.
It's going to be intense.
Oh, yeah.
So.
And Mandela Effect.
Yeah, that's going to be a cool
for
episode. Yeah, so episode 11.
In the can.
Yeah. So check us out. Facebook, Instagram. Review us, rate us. We're on iTunes. Go there, talk about how cool we are, tell people about us, and keep listening.
Comment, subscribe.
Yep. Talk to us.
Review.
Nobody talks to us.
No, they really don't.
Just come talk to us.
Right.
I can look at our numbers. You all are listening.
Yeah.
I see you.
I see you there.
I can't see specifically who you are, but I can see you.
Yes.
So talk to us.
Please.
Yeah.
Please.
Please. We're just alone in this podcast room. Come talk to us. All right. That's it.
That's it.
Episode 11
of Unknowable.
All right. Love you.